Donquixote Doflamingo begins as a child of the celestial dragons, the world nobles who sit above law and morality in One Piece's social order. Being born into that class isn't just wealth, it's an identity built on entitlement, immunity, and the belief that everyone else exists to serve you. Doflamingo internalizes that worldview early, so when his father, Donquixote Homing, voluntarily renounces their status and leaves Mary Geoise to live as ordinary humans, it doesn't humble Doflamingo, it destabilizes him. He's still thinking like a god forced to walk among people he was raised to treat as property. The problem is that renouncing the title doesn't erase the history. Common citizens have lived under the celestial dragon's cruelty for generations: slavery, executions, theft, and casual violence. So when Homing tries to start over, the public doesn't see a repentant man. They see a former oppressor trying to escape consequences. That resentment turns into direct retaliation. The family is attacked, their home is destroyed, and they are driven into poverty and isolation. This matters because Doflamingo's evil isn't born from a single traumatic moment. It's built from repeated experiences that confirm his worst instincts: that the world is hostile, that mercy is weakness, and that power is the only safety. As their situation worsens, the family loses what stability they have left. Doflamingo's mother dies after prolonged suffering in terrible living conditions, which removes the last emotional anchor in the household. Homing continues trying to hold on to a moral choice, living without the privileges of their former status, but Doflamingo interprets that choice as an unforgivable betrayal. In his mind, his father didn't do the right thing. He took away their godhood, exposed them to vengeance, and forced them to live like prey. That's the foundation of Doflamingo's later ideology. He doesn't just want a rule. He wants a world where he can never be made powerless again. Then Doflamingo meets Treble, which is the turning point where trauma becomes a criminal identity. Treble doesn't rescue Doflamingo out of compassion. He recognizes Doflamingo's rare potential. Doflamingo has already displayed Conqueror's haki as a child, which signals the kind of overwhelming willpower associated with top-tier rulers. Treble frames this as destiny, and hands Doflamingo two tools that formalize his path: a gun and the Ito Ito no Mi, also known as string fruit. That combination is important. One represents direct, human murder. The other represents control, binding, manipulating, and turning people into puppets. These two methods become the core of Doflamingo's villainy for the rest of his life. At only 10 years old, Doflamingo kills his father. This is not an impulsive accident. It is a deliberate act that symbolically rejects Homing's morality. By murdering the one person who tried to strip power from him, Doflamingo chooses a new principle. He will never submit to a world that can punish him. After this, Treble and his group reorganize around Doflamingo as their leader, not because Doflamingo has earned it through kindness, but because he has proven he can do what most people cannot: cross moral lines without hesitation. From that point on, Doflamingo stops being a damaged child reacting to the world and becomes an active force shaping it. Doflamingo does not simply seek dominance. He believes the world is fundamentally ruled by violence and hypocrisy, and that anyone who denies this is lying to themselves. His worldview is built on the idea that morality is a luxury invented by those who are temporarily safe. From his perspective, laws exist to protect the powerful. Justice is selectively enforced, and ideals are meaningless without the strength to impose them. This belief system explains why Doflamingo does not pretend to be righteous or misunderstood. He openly embraces being a villain because, to him, villainy is just honesty without restraint. What separates Doflamingo from most antagonists is that he doesn't want order. He wants imbalance. He believes the world reveals its true nature only when systems collapse. This is why he repeatedly engineers situations where institutions turn on themselves. He manipulates pirates, revolutionaries, kings, and even the world government into destabilizing their own structures. Doflamingo calls this pulling the strings. But it is not just metaphorical. His literal power allows him to control bodies, while his strategic thinking allows him to control outcomes. In both cases, people become tools rather than individuals. Doflamingo's obsession with control is a direct response to his childhood powerlessness. When he lost his celestial dragon status, He learned that identity, safety, and dignity could be stripped away instantly. As a result, he designs his life so that nothing is left to chance. He gathers information obsessively, stockpiles leverage, and ensures that every alliance is based on dependency or fear. Loyalty, in his system, is not earned through trust. It is enforced through consequences. Anyone useful is kept alive. Anyone unnecessary is discarded without hesitation. This philosophy reaches its clearest expression in how Doflamingo views people beneath him. He does not hate them, and he does not underestimate them. He simply does not see them as equals. Civilians, soldiers, and even subordinates are resources to be consumed. Their suffering is not emotional to him. It is mechanical. If destroying a country secures his position, the destruction is justified. If turning allies into enemies accelerates chaos, then betrayal is efficient. Every action is evaluated by outcome, never by morality. Doflamingo's belief system also explains why he can coexist with the world government while actively undermining it. He understands that the same corruption that enables celestial dragons to rule also allows criminals like him to thrive. Rather than opposing the system, he exploits its contradictions. He becomes a warlord, not to serve the government, but to gain immunity, intelligence, and legal cover. In his mind, this is proof that the world already belongs to monsters. It simply pretends otherwise. Dressrosa is the clearest demonstration of how Doflamingo applies his philosophy in practice. He does not conquer Dressrosa through open war. Instead, he dismantles it from the inside by exploiting trust, memory, and identity. Using manipulation, blackmail, and supernatural control, he turns a functioning kingdom into a perfectly contained system where truth is erased and fear replaces loyalty. Doflamingo first gains power by framing King Riku as a tyrant. Through the use of his devil fruit abilities, he forces Riku to attack his own people, creating a public massacre that permanently destroys the king's legitimacy. This step is crucial. Doflamingo does not remove rulers by killing them. He removes them by breaking their image. Once the public loses faith, power changes hands without resistance. Doflamingo then presents himself as the solution, positioning his takeover as restoration rather than conquest. The true horror of Dressrosa lies in the manipulation of memory through Sugar's devil fruit. Citizens who oppose Doflamingo are transformed into toys, stripped of their humanity, and erased from the memories of everyone who ever knew them. Families forget children, spouses forget partners. Entire relationships vanish instantly. This is not just physical oppression, it is existential erasure. People don't just disappear, they are removed from history while remaining conscious of their own suffering. Doflamingo uses this system to create total compliance. Anyone who resists is erased. Anyone who obeys is allowed to live normally, unaware of the crimes sustaining their peace. This creates a population that cannot organize a rebellion because it cannot even remember that resistance exists. Fear becomes invisible, embedded into daily life rather than enforced publicly. The result is a kingdom that looks joyful on the surface but is structurally dependent on continuous human suffering beneath it. What makes Dressrosa especially disturbing is that Doflamingo does not rule it personally. He delegates cruelty, turning subordinates into instruments of oppression, while he oversees everything from a distance. This reinforces his belief that power is strongest when indirect. By the time open rebellion begins, the kingdom has already been hollowed out. The people are not just oppressed, they are psychologically disarmed. Doflamingo does not limit his cruelty to a single kingdom. Beyond Dressrosa, he operates as Joker, one of the most powerful brokers in the global underworld.
Joker とは闇のブローカーとしての通り名に過ぎない。Donquixote Doflamingo だ。
This role allows him to convert violence, war, and human suffering into stable profit. Unlike most pirates who rely on raids or territory, Doflamingo builds an international supply chain of destruction, proving that his villainy is systemic rather than personal. At the core of this operation is the production and distribution of smile fruits, artificial devil fruits that grant Zoan-like powers with catastrophic side effects. Doflamingo supplies these weapons to pirate crews and military forces across the world, fully aware that the failure rate leaves users permanently disfigured, mentally damaged, or trapped in uncontrollable laughter. These consequences are not accidents. They are acceptable losses in a system designed to mass-produce soldiers without concern for long-term damage. By controlling smile production, Doflamingo indirectly fuels wars, overthrows regimes, and destabilizes entire regions. Armies empowered by smile users gain short-term strength but long-term instability, ensuring continuous conflict. This constant warfare creates demand for more weapons, more resources, and more control, locking the world into a feedback loop that benefits Doflamingo regardless of who wins or loses. In this system, peace is unprofitable, so instability becomes the product. Doflamingo's underworld influence also grants him leverage over the world government. His knowledge of illegal arms deals, forbidden research, and secret trade routes makes him too dangerous to eliminate outright. This is why he can act openly as both a pirate and a government-sanctioned warlord. He understands that institutions built on secrecy cannot afford transparency. As long as he holds information that could collapse reputations or expose systemic corruption, he remains untouchable. What makes this role especially evil is its detachment. Doflamingo rarely witnesses the suffering his actions cause. He doesn't need to. His system functions regardless of individual pain. Children turned into soldiers, civilians caught in wars, and nations reduced to rubble are all distant data points on a balance sheet. This distance allows him to escalate harm without emotional resistance, transforming cruelty into logistics. Doflamingo is ultimately defeated in Dressrosa, but the manner of his downfall is critical to understanding why he remains one of One Piece's most evil villains, rather than a tragic anti-hero. Doflamingo does not lose because he realizes he is wrong, and he does not soften when confronted with the consequences of his actions. He loses because his control finally breaks under forces stronger than him, not because his ideology collapses. During his final confrontation, Doflamingo never expresses remorse for the people of Dressrosa, the erased lives, or the global damage caused by his underworld dealings. Instead, he mocks the idea of justice itself, openly stating that history is written by the victors. This reinforces a consistent pattern. Even in defeat, he refuses moral accountability. For Doflamingo, losing does not mean being wrong. It simply means being overpowered in that moment. After his capture, Doflamingo remains dangerous despite imprisonment. His knowledge of the world government's secrets and his connections to the criminal underworld ensure that he is treated as a liability rather than a criminal to be forgotten. He continues to influence events indirectly, showing that his power was never limited to physical strength or territory. His mind, information, and reputation survive his fall. What prevents Doflamingo from being redeemed is that his suffering never leads to self-reflection. Many villains in One Piece are shaped by trauma, but they often display regret, hesitation, or a desire for change when confronted with their failures. Doflamingo does not. He fully accepts the world he helped corrupt and believes it validates his worldview. To him, the chaos he caused proves that the world deserves monsters like him. In the end, Doflamingo stands as a villain whose evil is not accidental, emotional, or misguided. It is deliberate, sustained, and rationalized. He chooses domination over coexistence, control over freedom, and chaos over peace at every opportunity. And even when stripped of power, he never abandons those choices.